Welcome back to consecutive day 1005 of a diary of a runpreneur. And in today's episode, I want to talk to you about feeling vulnerable, anxious, and scared. So please give this a subscribe, share, like, and comment, as the more people we get in front of, the more money we raise on my fundraising mission to save the lives of children by attempting the ultimate ultramarathon. All the information about the challenge, how you can get involved, is in the link in the comments below. Thank you as always, and let's get started. So, consecutive day 1005 of a diary of a runpreneur. And in today's episode I want to talk to you about the emotions of feeling vulnerable, feeling anxious, and scared. And the reason for this is that I'm going through these very emotional moments. When you get those knots in your stomach, butterflies in your stomach, as some people call them, you're just on edge. And the reason for this is that I have a very important meeting tomorrow with a council within a local authority where I have several properties that I rent out. And this is completely my fault, okay? Even though I'm not operationally involved in the running of my property management business, my team have acted in my best interest, and I haven't had the correct systems and processes in place to avoid this happening. So this is on me. Now, this is when systems and processes, when you outsource and delegate, when you don't have, every I dotted and T crossed, this is where it can come and bite you in the backside. So I've talked about this in the past. This is to do with council tax liability. Now, my portfolio of properties used to be HMOs. They've now been switched back to single tenancy properties. And we did that for a number of reasons. A better standard of living for the tenants. They're easier to manage. You don't have to have all the HMO regulations and all of those types of things to contend with. And another benefit is that on a single tenancy property with no more than two tenants, so no more than two joint tenants on a single tenancy, the council tax liability will fall on behalf of the tenants. Now, the challenge came when we made this transition, when ultimately I had historically been liable for all these houses for council tax, and then as we gradually transitioned them all back to single tenancy properties, the liability was passed over to the tenants, correctly so, legally so. And the challenge has come is that we've all the documentation has been submitted to the councils, etc., to confirm this, and also on the odd occasion tenancy documentation has had to have been amended, which is completely legal, providing both the tenant and the landlord agree. Now, where my team have gone wrong on this perspective, and it's me who takes the blame for this, first and foremost, it's easy for people to blame others. But if you're responsible, you have a obligation to make sure that everything's in place correctly. And the one area of documentation, contractual documentation, I didn't have in place was the authorization of tenancy amendments. Now, the frustrating thing is, I know full and well that my property manager, who is immense, has physically sat down with every tenant in question, explained in great detail, helped them with all the changes, and has even gone to the lengths of submitting them on their behalf. Now, any of you that have got social tenants or people that may have all sorts of different issues to contend with in the social sector, but several of our tenants need a huge amount of support, not just financial, mental support, to ensure that everything's submitted on their behalf, because they, to be quite honest with you, some of them are just not capable, and it's a flaw in the system really that they have been permitted to move into the private rented sector when ultimately supported living would be far more suitable for them. But regardless of this, it falls upon us as private landlords to do what we can to help. And put it in perspective, you might think, oh, you're pushing council tax liability onto the tenants, but let's look at the bigger picture here. They historically were in a house where I paid the council tax. However, they had a room in a house with maybe 3 or 4 other tenants in a sizable house. However, they're renting a room in a house, in a shared house, sharing bathroom facilities, all these types of things, which is not the nicest of environments, especially when a lot of social tenants can often have antisocial behaviour or addiction-related challenges that they're overcoming. So it creates a pretty antisocial or environment that's not particularly nice to live in. All of a sudden we switched it over to no more than 2 tenants on a joint tenancy sharing a whole house or renting a whole house between them. It all of a sudden becomes a home. You've got lots of space. It's far more sustainable, much better standard of living. The downside of that on behalf of the tenants is that the council tax liability then falls upon them as opposed to the landlord. Now, the good thing from their perspective is, due to their financial circumstances, they may only be liable for possibly 25% of the total council tax bill, and then that would be divided by, or jointly and severally liably between the two of them. So they could be looking at somewhere in the region of 12.5% of a total council tax bill each, which is should be manageable based on their universal credit claims. But the problem is they're not great at budgeting, and they generally default on these types of bills. So their stock response in many instances is to say, oh, I shouldn't be liable for that, and then that gets pushed back onto the landlord, rightly or wrongly. Then it's down to the landlord to provide the supporting documentation. Now, I have all the supporting documentation to provide to the councils. However, when there's been an amendment to the tenancy, and in certain instances where you have 2 tenants on a joint tenancy, one of them decides to move and we replace it with somebody, it's far easier to amend the tenancy and get permission from the tenants to do so than submitting a whole new application and tenancy application. It just makes it far more streamlined. However, where the team have fallen foul is that they didn't get written confirmation. They had verbal confirmation of these amendments, and as a result, when it comes down to a council and assessing these documents, and the tenant says, oh, I didn't agree to that, it then comes down to our word against theirs. And that's how I find myself with this very difficult meeting to deal with tomorrow, to determine liability. And there's strong words that get floated around in these types of circumstances, like fraud, which is horrendous, because I've been a law-abiding citizen. Everything I do by the book, or within the realms of the law. And to be, accused of this is quite alarming. And you then have to prepare immensely for an interview, which is probably going to be pretty challenging, pretty intense, and it's fearful because you don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. Regardless of, my conscience is clear. I know what I've done. I know that there has been a mistake that's happened outside, well, not outside of my control, not directly from my personal hands, but my area of responsibility. So I have to take ownership of that. However, we've got contracts now in place to put this issue right. It's whether or not the council will see the truth, or whether they'll think I'm just another greedy landlord trying to avoid paying what I'm potentially liable for. And I don't know what the prosecution consequences could be, which is fearful, which makes me incredibly vulnerable, incredibly anxious and scared. So it's that's how I find myself. But I take responsibility for my team. My team do the best by me all the time, and it should have been on me to spot this oversight. And unfortunately, I've been so detached from the property business for so long now that it's something that I didn't identify. So I'm going to have to deal with this tomorrow, and hope that I can provide sufficient evidence, show sufficient integrity of me as a character and how I operate, and show that there's no financial benefit. I haven't benefited financially at all from this situation. The structure and the liability is absolutely correct. It's the clerical administration which is being questioned. So but it's alarming. So watch this space. I'll certainly update you tomorrow on how this goes. But yeah, the moral to today's story is get your legal documentation in place. Now, all my documentation was in place for the traditional process. The only time it wasn't in place is when there was amendments to contracts, which is something that I didn't foresee at the beginning when all this stuff was set up. Bear with me a second. Just going past somebody. I hate talking when I'm running past people. But anyway, so yeah, that's the moral to the story, is periodically review your legal documentation. Check it with a solicitor. Have someone cast their eyes over it to make sure there's no areas or gaps in the real protection, because often when it comes back to bite you in the backside, it's too late. So fingers crossed I can produce enough evidence and put a strong enough case forward showing that I do operate as a law-abiding citizen. It is a complete clerical oversight that we have now put right, and hopefully whoever's prosecuting in this side of things will see that yes, genuinely, this is something that is a simple oversight which hasn't caused any financial burden to the government or anybody else, and hopefully it will be appeased correctly, but you never know. So anyway, watch this space. I will update you tomorrow. That's it for me today. Please do give us a subscribe, share, like and comment, as the more people we get in front of, the more money we raise on my fundraising mission to save the lives of children by attempting the ultimate ultra marathon. All the information about the challenge and how you can get involved in the link in the comments below. Thank you as always. Stay positive, stay happy, and I'll see you again tomorrow.